Hey Crossroads, Pastor Fallon here, and this past Sunday we talked about living a God-centered life, and I used the metaphor from Jeremiah 18 verses 1 through 6, and with the potter and the clay, and we talked about how the potter is sovereign, just like God is sovereign, that the potter's in control of the clay, and God is in control of our lives and is shaping us into who He wants us to be. That the analogy is that God is the potter and we are the clay. And just as the potter has the right to shape the clay, so does God have the right to shape us into who He wants us to be, as long as we are in relationship with Him. So in the God-centered life, we recognize that our life is not our own. It is not our will, our plans, or our desires that should direct us. Instead, we are the clay in the hands of the potter, and we are called to surrender to His shaping. He's the one who knit us together in our mother's womb and created us, and so we should want to surrender to Him and to let Him shape us, and to let Him be in control of our lives. So a God-centered life is one that is of continual surrender to God's will. And so we need to make sure that we are continually surrendering to His will, and that is our response as the clay. So the second point was clay's response, and how we are to surrender and trust Him in all things, that we are His. We are here for His purpose. And I talked about my story in coming back to Colorado from Georgia, and how God just molded me and shaped me in that, and how I eventually ended up from the Front Range back to Montrose, and the shaping that happened there was just tremendous. And if you want to hear the full story, you can go back and listen to the full message. But He uses times of difficulty, times of uncomfortableness, to shape us into who He has called us to be. And our response as the clay just needs to be to surrender and to trust Him and trust what He's doing in the shaping, even when it's uncomfortable and not easy. And then our third point was the purpose of the shaping, and that the purpose of the shaping is for God's glory, but for our good. And so how we are being shaped for His divine purposes, and that the ultimate goal of being shaped by God is not for personal comfort and success, but to reflect His glory. So to make sure that we are reflecting His glory, we are in relationship with Him. A God-centered life lived on purpose is to honor and reflect the glory of the potter. God has a unique plan for each one of us, and our job is to remain in His hands and to trust that He is making us into what He intends us to be. So let's remember that the God-centered life recognizes and submits to the sovereignty of the potter. It's a life that surrenders to His shaping hands, trusting that He is always at work for our good and His glory. And finally, it's a life that lives out its purposes, or its purpose to be a vessel of honor in the hands of the Creator, reflecting His love, mercy, and power. We are the clay and He is the potter. So remember to ask yourself these things. Are we yielding to God's shaping hands? Do we trust that God's hands are capable and loving, even when we don't understand the process? Are we trusting Him to mold us, even when it's uncomfortable? Do we see our trials, our growth, and our successes as part of God's purposes to reveal Himself through us? And are we living for His glory, knowing that He has a purpose for each one of us? So may we all live God-centered lives, being like clay in the hands of the potter, allowing God to shape us, reshape us, and mold us into the vessels that He desires us to be.